Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Hey folks, today is April 4th, 2023. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Today is the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We will talk about his message, talk about his memory, and also talk with Marc Morial, CEO of the National Urban League, and others about the continuation of his fight for economic freedom and the freedom for African Americans and others. Yes, I'm here live at the MLK Memorial here in Washington, D.C. We'll also be live streaming their event and going live at 7:01. That was the time, 7:01 p.m. Eastern, when Dr. King was shot on the balcony of the Rain Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Also on today's show, we'll talk about Donald Trump being arraigned in New York City. We'll have a variety of guests discussing the impact of him becoming the first president, again, arrested and arraigned in American history. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. The Black Star Network, let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
Yes, I am. Yes, I. Hey, folks, Roland Martin here. I am live at the MLK Memorial here in the nation's capital. As you see, there are a number of people who have been coming here. It is one of the most visited memorials here in Washington, D.C., right across from the Lincoln Memorial. Today is April 4th. The 55th anniversary of when he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. And as you see, there is a wreath here from the National Park Service for Dr. King on this particular day. And so there are a number of people, as I said, who are out here, family with children, school kids as well. And as we said, it was 55 years. It was 55 years ago today in Memphis when Dr. King was standing on the moat, headed to dinner with a number of other pastors when shots rang out and he was again assassinated. That happened at 7:01 p.m. Eastern. He was pronounced dead at a hospital close by at 7:05 p.m. Eastern. Today at 7:01, we will use the ringing of the bell that took place at the Rain Motel in 2018 for the 50th anniversary to commemorate that particular moment. Also, what's going to be happening out here, I'm going to walk over here. There's going to be a ceremony taking place here with the Memorial Foundation. They're the ones, of course, who built the MLK Memorial. They are actually having a program here beginning at 7 p.m. on the Black Star Network. We'll also be taking that video live as well. So as you see, they are setting up as we speak for that particular program. Reverend Al Sharpton is going to be one of the speakers of the program. So as you see, this is where it is going to be taking place. And as I said, we are going to be live. We're going to be live from here at that particular time. This is a day, obviously, when we are, you think back and reflect on what took place on that day, and we think about his children and what they still have to deal with on this day, where there are events commemorating him. But again, we have to think about what it's like for them losing their father on this particular day. At the end of our show, we were going to be actually streaming a program we put together called April 4th, 1968, which is a program focused on a number of people in the tenets of King as they reflected and talked about what took place on that day, where they were, what was going on, their feelings, their thoughts and reflections about April 4th, 1968. Among them, of course, Genola Clayton. Also, Reverend C.T. Vivian on that. Also, we'll be hearing from Billy D. Williams and Smokey Robinson and Reverend James Lawson. Anita Abernathy, and so many others as they talk about what took place on that fateful day in Memphis. Folks, it is a very emotional tribute. Also, again, Congressman Eleanor Holmes Norton, the late Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., we have all of those individuals in that particular special. And so we're going to have that special again after today's show. And so you don't want to miss that. We have stuff nobody else has. And so we look forward to sharing that with you right here on the Black Star Network as we remember the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Right here on the Black Star Network. A lot of stuff we're going to be covering as well, but we're going to do this here. We're going to go to a break. We come back, folks. We're going to play for you what Zanona Clayton. So Zanona Clayton was the secretary for Dr. King. She traveled with Coretta Scott King. And so what she did was she actually took Dr. King to the airport. And she shared with us the last conversation she had with him and the eerie things that happened. You think about that April 3rd, 1968 speech that pretty much where he was predicting, of course, that he was not going to live long, but there were things that he actually did that he had never done before that also gave a sense that he knew his life was coming to a close. We're going to share that when we come back right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered, right here on the Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, we're talking about the difficulty of being able to acquire wealth for Black Americans. My guest, Emily Flitter, is the author of The White Wall: How Big Finance is Bankrupting Black America.
The bad stuff that you feel when you're dealing with the financial services industry is not your fault. It's not your fault, and you don't deserve to be treated like this.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Table with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Hey, I'm Deion Cole from Blackish.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
55 years ago today, around 6:05 p.m. Central Time, 7:05 p.m. Atlanta time, my father's life was cut short by an assassin's bullet. He didn't die. What I mean by that, many people, when they talk about that day, say Martin Luther King Jr. died. No, his life was cut short by an assassin's bullet that caused a cessation of his breath on this earth. But he didn't die. He transitioned to a higher realm. And the reason I think this world has not come apart is because the spirit of Dr. King has been dispersed and dispensed throughout this universe, just as the spirit of the one that we call in the Christian faith, Jesus the Christ, is dispensed throughout this world. But Jesus is the person that Dr. King was following and in alignment with. And everything that he poured out was to connect us back to Jesus and the mission of Jesus, which was to love in a way that no matter how difficult, challenging, ugly, fierce, mean, oppressive, exploitative people might be, we have the capacity in our love to transform people's minds and their lives and our circumstance. And so Dr. King may not physically be with us here today, but he still lives. He lives in and through this family. He lives in and through this institution and those who work with me here. He lives in and through many of you and those young people that are here today.
That was Bernice King, one of the three surviving children of Dr. King, speaking today at the MLK Center in Atlanta at the National Civil Rights Museum, formerly Lorraine Motel. They actually had an event there. We broadcast that event on the Black Star Network. You can actually go check it out there. But folks, we talked to many people who reflected on what took place 55 years ago. And Zernona Clayton was one of the folks who shared with us just an amazing story that we wanted to share with you on today. Here is my discussion with Zernona Clayton about April 4th, actually April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King leaving Atlanta for the final time for that ill-fated trip to Memphis.
I drove him to the airport to go to Memphis, but he said to me that he felt like the country was at a point now where it was not ready for change. That all the change we've made is about all we're going to get. And so when he comes back from Memphis, he said, when I come back from this trip, Corette and I are going to take a year off to go to India again. We got to retool. That wasn't his language. But he said, we've got to start again. Now, what was the problem with that is that SCLC was already in the planning stages for the
People's Campaign.
For People's Campaign.
His idea.
Mm-hmm. But he told me he wasn't going to go. He was going to abandon the idea. He was leaving when he came back. He was going to India. Now, there are those who differ. I don't say that a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm taking a stand now to tell you this on television, because I didn't express that to everybody because I saw it wasn't well received. But that's the truth. And so I'm telling you now the truth. The planners of the march didn't want to hear it because there was, you got to have some movement after he's no longer here. You got to have some action-filled programmatic thrust. Otherwise, you're going to die. So that was a bold statement, but he told it to me. Now, I have no way of knowing whether he really meant it. I believe he meant it because he didn't joke a lot about his plans. I think he meant it. He said, the country now is not right for what we're doing, and I've got to make a switch.
You dropped him off at the airport. and he gets out. As you think back, have you, I'm sure you have you just went back and just played every part of that? What he had on, what he said, last look, all of those things. So the last time you saw him alive.
Yeah. But let me tell you what happened. The day before, I was at their home. Mrs. King was convalescing from recent illness, and she was there. Mother-in-law, well, Martin's mother was there, Martin and I. After dinner, we were playing the piano. He's a great singer, and I played the piano. He said, I bet you didn't know I could sing. I said, well, I heard you could. No, I didn't know you could. He said, well, I know you can play, so sit down at the piano.
You majored in music in college?
Yeah, yeah. So we had such fun. We were singing and, just having a great time. When we separated, the evening ended, I went home and told him I'd pick him up the next morning, whatever time established. But Mama King called me that night about 11:30, and she said, I know you're taking ML to the airport tomorrow, but tell him something for me. Said, just like that fun we had today, I'd like to have more days like that. I know I'm the mother and I have to understand he's busy, but you see to it and tell him I want him to plan more fun time for family hour. Will you do that for me? I said, of course. Well, I told him, I said, now your mother called me, and I told her she wants more of your time, and we're going to see that you do that. Well, guess what? About 3 or 4 o'clock Atlanta time, because Memphis was an hour behind us, he called her. Talked to her about an hour and a half. She said it never happened before. Could you take your mother for granted? He knew she was going to be there. She was supportive of her. The son loved him dearly. But he didn't bother to call her. But when I saw her that first time that night, because I went over to check on them, she said, listen, when this pain subsides a little bit, I'm going to tell you how much I appreciate what you did. Because he told me you told him what I said. And that prompted him to call. And they had a big laugh about, here's the call. And he knew, I think, because he called his brother. He'd never done that before. Called him on the phone, I understand, talked a good time with him. He did a lot of odd things. I talked to him, and he said to me, why does my room number sound so familiar to you? I mean, to me, he said. And I said, I don't know, because I don't know what room you're in, because we'd switched hotels. And he said, it's 306. And I said, well, that's my house number. And I said, you've been here enough, so I guess you make it the relation. That all of these things were odd things that happened that day.
April 4th.
Uh-huh. It was early in the day. He called me. And then it called his mother, called his brother, and Andy said they were playing pillow throwing, whatever.
After he came back from court, came in and
they
had a pillow fight.
Yeah. And so he did a lot of things that day that were unusual, I understand. I wasn't there, I was here. But he did a lot of unusual things, Oh, I tell you something else that was most unusual. Coretta's favorite gift is red roses. And every birthday, her birthday's in April. April 27th is her birthday. Now, he left was March, I guess, when he left Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He bought her some artificial flowers and left them in the library of the house. And he told her to go get the flowers. And, no, he told the housekeeper to tell her, when he leaves, go get those flowers out of the library. She was angry. He said, did you get those roses? So she said, yes, but I'm mad about it. She said, why? He said, because they're artificial. And guess what he said to her? I didn't know whether I would be here on your birthday or not, but I wanted your roses to be here. Now, he died, that was April 4th. Well, that was April 3rd when he talked to her. Her birthday is April 27th. He said, I don't know whether I will be there in person for your birthday, so, but here are your red roses.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
A lot of these corporations or people that are running stuff push black people if they're doing a certain thing. What that does is it creates a butterfly effect of any young kid who, you know, wants to leave any situation they're in, and the only people they see are people that are doing this. So I gotta be a gangster, I gotta shoot, I gotta sell, I gotta do this in order to do it. And it just becomes a cycle. But when someone comes around and is making other, we don't, you know, they don't want to push it or put money into it. So that's definitely something I'm trying to fix too, is just show there's other avenues. You don't got to be a rapper, you don't got to be a ball player. You can be a country singer, you can be an opera singer, you can be a damn whatever, you know? Showing the different avenues. And that is possible, and it's hard for people to realize it's possible until someone does it.
Coming up on the next Black Table, a conversation with Professor Howard W. French on his new book, Born in Blackness, covering 600 years of global African history and helping us understand how the world we know today is a gift from Black people.
There could have been no West without Africa and Africa.
That's on the next Black Table with me, Greg Carr, only on the Black Star Network.
Asking me about some of the pocket squares that I wear. Now, I don't know, Robert don't have one on. Now, I don't particularly like the white pocket squares. I don't like even the silk ones. And so I was reading GQ magazine a number of years ago, and I saw this guy who had this pocket square here, and it looks like a flower. This is called a shibori pocket square. This is how the Japanese manipulate the fabric to create this sort of flower effect. So I'm going to take it out and then place it in my hand so you see what it looks like. And I said, man, this is pretty cool. And so I tracked down, it took me a year to find a company that did it. And so they make these about 47 different colors. And so I love them because, again, as men, we don't have many accessories to wear, so we don't have many options. And so this is really a pretty cool pocket square. Now, what I love about this here is you saw when it's in the pocket, you know, it gives you that flower effect like that. But if I wanted to also, unlike other, because if I flip it and turn it over, it actually gives me a different type of texture. And so therefore it gives me a different look. So there you go. So if you actually want to get one of these shibori pocket squares, we have them in 47 different colors. All you got to do is go to RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. So it's RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. All you got to do is go to my website, and you can actually get this. Now, for those of you who are members of our Bring the Funk fan club, there's a discount for you to get our pocket squares. That's why you also got to be a part of our Bring the Funk fan club. And so that's what we want you to do. And so it's pretty cool. So if you want to jazz your look up, you can do that. In addition, y'all see me with some of the feather pocket squares. My sister, who's a designer, she actually makes these. They're all custom made. So when you also go to the website, you can also order one of the customized feather pocket squares right there at RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. So please do so. And of course, at that goes to support the show. And again, if you're a Bring the Funk fan club member, you get a discount. This is why you should join the fan club.
We feel the hidden impacts of climate change that land harder in Black, brown, and Native communities.
Not many people talk about it because they clearly don't know our lives. But with President Biden's landmark infrastructure and climate plans, our issues are finally seen.
Removing lead pipes means we know our water is safe. Cutting carbon pollution helps our kids breathe easier. 1.5 million new jobs means stable work in communities. The impact we need.
Right now.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Gavin Houston.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
All right, folks, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. Joining us right now is Marc Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League. Glad to have Marc on the show. Also, Savante Myrick. He is the new president for the People for the American Way. Glad to have both of you here. First off, Marc, I'll start with you. We often talk about this day, April 4th, being the commemoration of Dr. King's assassination. And the thing I need people to understand, and I was just on Instagram, and I played the full speech he gave on April 3rd, 1968. He was laying out a blueprint, a radical blueprint, an economic blueprint. He talked about collective action. He talked about collective economics. He talked about us pooling our resources. And then he said, we all must do this together. And I think that has to constantly be our focus. When we have these events, we can't simply be looking back. We got to be looking at what he was talking about and what we should be doing today to make it a reality.
Look, Roland, I agree. And I just brought this photo so you could take a look at it. And this is a photo of my father and grandfather with Dr. King in New Orleans in 1957.
Wow.
When he visited there to found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This was an event sponsored by Alpha Phi Alpha in New Orleans to raise money for SCLC. So a lot of memories on this day. Roland, you could not be more accurate in focusing on the economic opportunity, economic empowerment, economic justice plank of Dr. King's work, because it was, in effect, his last battle. He got an opportunity to vision that battle. He had planned the Poor People's March, which, as you know, was carried on by Ralph Abernathy and Coretta Scott King. But in many respects, if you come full circle now, 55 years since his tragic killing in Memphis, that issue is still the issue of our times. High levels of poverty, and now we have too many working men and women, who are still unable to make ends meet. So they're in effect in a form of poverty, even if the government may not consider them impoverished. And that work is the work of today. That work is challenging work. It's difficult work because the economy of today is made of global corporations. It's made of international trade. It's made of a separate set, or I should say a different set of factors. But it's a work I do every day to challenge those with economic power and money, to open their doors to economic opportunity, to prepare our people, to nurture small businesses. I was with a group of Black women-owned business owners on yesterday, listening to their work, listening to their vision, and hear their continuing cries of lack of access to meaningful capital. I love the photos you're showing because Dr. King remains, if you will, our drum major. Even for this generation, his words, his vision, his inspiration still guide all of us.
Savante, in that speech he gave on April 3rd, 1968, he says something that really speaks to democracy and the threat that we're under when they were being attacked when it came to marching. I'm going to play this and I want you to respond because in many ways that's the battle that we're still dealing with today, this threat to democracy. So folks, go to my iPad. Here we go. Watch this.
What we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any...
What you put on paper. And all these attacks, you know, we can expect that from other countries, but supposedly not in this country. You're taking over an organization that's dealing with this whole issue, this threat to democracy.
Yeah, and in fact, the very name of the organization, People for the American Way. I had family, when I announced I was leaving being mayor to take this organization, they said, Svante, when did you become a Republican? What is this, a gun rights group? What is this? Because even that idea of what the American way is has been so badly co-opted by the radical right. And what Dr. King was saying was, no, you people put on paper a promise. And that is an American promise. And what we, Black Americans, want is for you to live up to that ideal. And I think he's exactly right, not controversial to say that Dr. King was right, that the key to everything else that he was fighting for, economic security, family well-being, independence, pride, integrity, the key to all of those is a vote that counts. That's it. If we all stand on equal footing and have a vote that counts, we can clean up this country. And so that's what I'm proud to do with People for the American Way, an organization that was founded 43 years ago by Barbara Jordan and Norman Lear, and whose name was deliberately chosen to do exactly what Dr. King was doing in that clip, holding the American people accountable to the promise that was made but never quite lived up to in its founding documents.
Mark, in that speech, he talked about utilizing economic withdrawal, pulling resources, and he name-checked companies. And look, I have been engaged in this fight for black-owned advertising for black-owned media. We've been using this platform to say, hey, these companies. John Rodgers talks about this as well. Let's stop talking about supplier diversity. Talk about business diversity. Talk about actual contracts. Talk about dollars. Talk about not just construction dollars, but literally transportation, catering, PR, event planning. You name it. And again, when we look at economically, we have been so frozen out of these systems. What King said, we must be putting pressure on these companies and make it clear, if you don't do right by black people, we're going to withdraw our money.
Let's understand one point, and that is the consumer spending power of black America. The number, I believe, is anywhere from 1.5 to 1.8 trillion, which would make us larger than many, many nations, all except the largest economies in the world. And we do have that spending power. I think we have to figure out how to best harness it. The Montgomery bus boycott, which was an economic boycott, was successful because it was focused. It had a very specific objective, and it wasn't envisioned that it would take forever to bring the Montgomery leadership and the owners of the bus company to their knees. But I think you're right. We have to do a lot more to figure out how to harness our spending power for these sorts of aims. I do agree with that. And I do agree that we, in the advertising space and in the media space, it is a space where we have some significant leverage, because many of the most significant consumer brands in the country rely significantly not only on black consumers, but on consumers of color, on younger consumers as well. So it is, I think, an important tool that we have to keep in our toolbox. But I do believe, Roland, in all candor, we have to think strategically about how we best use it.
Marc Morial, CEO Urban League. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Savante, come back to you here. Again, so we talk about economics, but we talk about the vote. Look at what's happening. Republicans in Florida are now trying to move forward a new bill to so-called protect the right to vote. You look at Tennessee, how they are upset that 3 lawmakers chose to stand with protesters. They spoke out of turn. They are moving to expel them from Tennessee. The attacks on Tennessee State University. We see what's happening in Georgia, in Texas. And look, you got 2 critical elections happening today. Mayor in Chicago. Then, of course, you got the Supreme Court race there in Wisconsin. And people need to understand that this idea of that right to vote goes directly in hand with economics. And there's a reason folks want to keep us from using it.
Yes, and that's right. What's the reason that they want to keep? Whatever else the Republicans are, and there are a lot of other things, whatever else they are, they're very smart. They're very smart. And we need to trust that they know what they're doing. And so while the rest of the world might expect, oh, Donald Trump, their demigod leader, is being indicted, 1 million people will march on New York City. No, they are busy at the same time in Nashville, as you said, expelling 3 progressive legislators.
1 white, 2 African American.
Young people, simply for standing up and saying these massacres, these gun massacres can't continue. They are busy in Florida systematically dismantling people's right to vote, because they know that when black people in particular, when black people vote, equality rises. It just happens naturally. We put in not just Barack Obama, but also a Democratic majority. Obamacare lifts millions of people out of poverty and insecurity. Same thing happened with Biden's presidency, right? So we need to start trusting that the Republicans know what they're doing. And we need to start meeting them on their battlefield, so that while we're all distracted, watching what Trump's doing, watching the plane take off, watching it land, watching him in some hearing, we need to figure out, what are the Republicans watching, what are they doing, and meet them where the actual action is.
So what are your plans for people for the American way?
Yeah, our plan is easy. We win power by winning elections. We win elections by changing the conversation and turning out the vote. So we want to do a better job of messaging, something that the left has really, we've been shellacked. The last messenger, I think, that had a grip on this was killed 50 plus years ago today. We need to be better narrative shapers. And then we need to actually stop dilly-dallying around, right? These elections, I've been in 4 elections myself personally. I've won all 4. And what I would tell my campaign is this: we know when election day is. Let us not act a week in advance like this is some unplanned emergency.
Right.
We know where the election is. We know who needs to vote. We know that Georgia will matter next year. We need to start canvassing right now. So we're starting a barbershop bus tour in Atlanta and around the Atlanta suburbs with our partners right now at a time when most other organizations will wait until October of 2024.
No.
It's ridiculous.
Well, what I have been saying, you're absolutely right. I've been actually saying that exact same thing, that what should be happening. But also what I've been saying is that our approach has to be different. First of all, there are a significant number of people who simply believe their vote is a waste of time. And so so before I can get you to vote, I got to get you registered. Before I got to get you registered, I then have to educate you. Before I educate you, I have to enlighten you. Right. So it's actually, it's a long process. And I think that what absolutely should be happening, there should be a series of town halls and other gatherings all across this country, educating people on literally what Congress has done, what others have done to actually begin to change this country. Because a lot of people simply don't know. Those of us who immersed in this, I mean, we know these ins and outs, but the average person has no idea. And people say, well, nothing has happened.
Yep. I mean, I saw it. I was on the ground in Georgia this past fall where, President Biden, he truly has passed legislation that's going to make enormous impact in people's day-to-day lives. I'm talking climate change, yes, but trillions of dollars pumped into communities like mine that had been traditionally been locked out. Folks just had no idea. They just said, well, I'm not feeling it yet, and so maybe I'll stay home. And
also the White House has been awful, as you said, in telling that story.
Yes, they're not so good, and the president doesn't get around the country like we hoped he would. But that's what we are here for, right? The folks who can go out and spread the good word. But start now. As you said, it's a process. I have to tell you the truth. I have to then register you to vote. I got to move you to decision and then action. You can't do that if you arrive in a state on October 15th and election day is November 8th. There's no time. And people won't trust you, and they're right not to trust you. So we want to fight in all 50 states year-round, in cycle, out of cycle, to build more voters.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why for us, we understand the power of media. And the reality is, if you're reaching somebody every single day, you can actually do that, which is why I've said to all these other different groups, you got to be spending money on advertising. You got to be supporting the media institutions, because guess what? The right, they're funding their media institutions.
True.
There's a reason why they're able to do what they do, because when you have the resources, that actually, it happens that way.
Yep. They used to say, don't pick fight with anybody who buys ink by the barrel.
Right.
And that was a reference to the newspaper barons. They buy ink by the barrel. Well, now you can't pick a fight with Rupert Murdoch, right? Who buys the airwaves by the billion, and has slowly indoctrinated people over the course of 40 years.
But not just him. It's the other billionaires who are funding the Daily Caller, the Daily Signal, the Daily Wire, who are funding Breitbart, all of these institutions.
The Ben Shapiros, the Boningos. And none of this happens organically. That's the other thing people got to, 9 out of the 10 most viral Facebook posts every day are coming from right-wing influencers. That's not an accident.
Oh, I can tell you for a fact. I mean, our content is being blocked on Facebook, flat out. I mean, look, I can tell you right now. In fact, I guess something that happened yesterday. We got some block or something. Can't remember exactly what it is. So
and they suppress it. And now with Elon Musk running Twitter, which is just out and out, did in public what has been happening in private for years, which is the richest person on the planet buys the place where the media gets distributed, and then uses it to disseminate his own agenda. So that's why I don't know if people at home realize what's happening here. This is my first time in the studio. What Roland here has built is exactly what we're talking about. I mean, black-owned media, where I don't want to get emotional, but this is how it needs to be done, where nobody can censor you, nobody can cut you off, and you can get the truth unfiltered to people. Bless you for doing this, and your team. It was a mighty team scrambling over there.
Well, that's why we tell folks that's why we have our app. We have a 24-hour channel because we're not beholden to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitter. People can go right to our app to hear our content, and that's the way we have to do it. Savante, appreciate it. Good luck as a new president. Look forward to having you back.
Thanks for having me out. We're just a couple blocks away, so really
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, sir.
All right, folks, got to go to break. We come back. My panel is standing by. We're going to talk about, yes, we will discuss what happened in New York City today with Donald Trump, but I wasn't going to let Donald Trump supersede Dr. King. Wasn't going to happen. I'll be right back. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
We feel the hidden impacts of climate change that land harder in Black, Brown, and Native communities.
Not many people talk about it because they clearly don't know our lives. But with President Biden's landmark infrastructure and climate plans, our issues are finally seen.
Removing lead pipes means we know our water is safe. Cutting carbon pollution helps our kids breathe easier. 1.5 million new jobs mean stable work in communities. The impact we need
right now.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, Dave.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Hi, I'm LD Barge.
Hey, yo, Peace World, what's going on? It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon, and you're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
All right, folks, we got a lot of things that are moving at one time. Yes, we did got Trump's, what happened with him, but I'm still talking about King moving forward economically. Got my panel. I'm going to be bringing them up in just 1 second, and then bringing up, again, our conversation about what happened today in New York. Joining us right now is John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope. John, glad to have you here. Money, money, money. I keep saying if you ain't having a money conversation, you're not having an American conversation. And I just think that every time we talk about King's birthday, we talk about people bring up speeches, we talk about today when he was assassinated, he hit that last sermon, I'm calling it a sermon, it wasn't just a speech. That was an economic message. The I Have a Dream speech was an economic message. If you people, they go back to listen to where do we go from here, which with the speech he gave to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at their conference in August of 1967, economic conversation. He understood you have to have an economic base as a black community in order to have a future.
Yeah, amen, amen, amen. Let me, by the way, echo the last speaker and say that I'm a member. Operation Hope is a member of Roland Martin Unfiltered. You got to walk your talk. You got to back your philosophy with your pocketbook. If you're not backing the philosophy of your pocketbook, you just run in your mouth. PhDs are good. PhDs are better. You go to church. You don't just preach. You don't just hear the sermon. You actually make a contribution to support the ministry through tithes and offering. So people should walk their talk today. We have almost we're at $1.5 trillion consumer spending power, Black America. And we got to do more than consume. We've got to invest.
Looks like John's video froze. Let me know when we got John back. Okay, John, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an absolute economic argument. And he was moving from civil rights to what I call civil rights. He was talking about all poor people, which included back then and now, the most poor people in this country are poor whites. People don't know that. More poor whites in America than poor anybody else. He was talking about the color of green. And by the way, I talked to Ambassador Andrew Young about an hour and a half ago, and he wanted me to tell you some things that he hasn't told anybody else. When you're ready, I will share that.
All right. So is that public or private?
It's public information.
All right, go ahead. You can share it now.
So Ambassador Andrew Young was on that balcony. And this was, Dr. King knew that he was going to be assassinated. He knew that his life was going to be cut short. There was too many people getting assassinated in that period. You know your history, Roland, so I won't bore you with the names and the details. He knew that there was a marker on his name called assassination. He decided he didn't want to be in fancy places with fancy people when this happened. He wanted to be with the least of these God's children. He wanted to be with the sanitation workers. He had gone back to Memphis in spite of the threats to be with the sanitation workers around an economic message because he knew that this was the third iteration of the civil rights campaign. He knew that the next movement was the most important movement, which is economics. And some felt that a Nobel Peace Prize winner talking about a redistribution of wealth strategy, which is what a pastor would do, is the most dangerous man on the planet, didn't want him to get to Washington, D.C. So he gave that mountaintop speech, as you know, and he collapsed in the arms of his advisors, as you know. And the next day, he had a pillow fight inside of the hotel room, which is one of the few times he was relaxed and comfortable. And it was almost like he had let go. He had surrendered. He wasn't fighting it anymore. And he walked out, and this is the part that most people don't know. Andrew Young said he was standing next to him, and a bullet pierced his chin. You want me to say all this, Roland?
Yeah, go ahead.
Bullet pierced his chin, ripped off his neck, and exposed his spinal cord. And he said his spinal cord was completely clean, no blood. And he said that he thinks, for those who are watching this or listening to this who want to have some level of peace, he thinks that Dr. King didn't hear the bullet, and he believes he was dead before he hit the ground, but he was right next to him. And there are, by the way, confirmed reports, and I won't get into details, but let's just say it's authorities who reported that there was a shooter also being targeted Dr. Andrew Young, and the message was, if you miss the dreamer, kill the strategist. So this was an absolute attempt, no different than with Abraham Lincoln. The folks could not win on the battlefield of the Civil War, so they decided to decapitate the government after that with an assassination attempt of Lincoln and his cabinet. People don't know that story, but there were several people attempted murder that night. Lincoln was the only one who was actually killed. And so the attempt was to take out the entire civil rights elite leadership because they were on to a new, and some thought, dangerous reality. We've got to finish this work that started with the first reconstruction of the Freedmen's Bank. It was literally, Lincoln was killed in April of 1865. Then Dr. King was killed in April of 1968.
Right.
Talking about money. And it's not like we're dumb or we're stupid. We're brilliant. When the rules are published and the playing field is level, look at you, we succeed. And so we've just never been taught capitalism or free enterprise. And Andrew Young says this: to live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. So we believe that financial literacy is a new civil rights issue. We got to move from consumers to wealth creation.
Yep.
And this is what he thinks Dr. King would be doing if he was alive today.
All right.
His daughter's doing some of that, by the way, Bernice King.
We're going to keep moving this thing forward, John. Always a pleasure to have you here. As I told Pastor Kenneth Whalum yesterday, April 4th, 2024, we're going to be in Memphis talking about money, bringing CEOs together. That's the conversation that we got to keep pushing, because that's what King was talking about. John, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
I'll be with you.
Yes, sir. Folks, we're going to a break. When we come back, we'll toll the bells at 7:01 p.m. Eastern. That was the moment that bullet struck Dr. King. We'll be right back on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Coming up on the next Black Table, a conversation with Professor Howard W. French on his new book, Born in Blackness, covering 600 years of global African history and helping us understand how the world we know today is a gift from Black people.
There could have been no West without Africa and Africa.
That's on the next Black Table with me, Greg Carr, only on the Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
On the next A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, re-entry anxiety. A lot of us are having trouble transitioning in this post-pandemic society and don't even realize it. We are literally stuck between two worlds, in purgatory. How to get out of purgatory and regain your footing and balance.
What emotions they're feeling and being able to label them, because as soon as you label an emotion, it's easier to self-regulate. It's easier to manage that emotion.
On the next A Balanced Life on Black Star Network.
That was from 5 years ago when we were in Memphis for MLK 50. On that balcony was the CEO of the National Civil Rights Museum, Father Michael Flager, longtime family friend of Dr. King and Coretta Scott King, and of course Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., who was there on that day in Memphis on April 4th, 1968. Dr. King shot 7:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Memphis, rushed to a nearby hospital, pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. Eastern. Dr. J. Lawrence Turner, pastor of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, joins us right now from Memphis. When Dr. King spoke the night before at Mason Temple, Pastor Turner, he specifically talked about the importance of black preachers using their voice. And said what they must be doing now. And he said specifically to have a relevant ministry now. What is happening in Memphis 55 years later? Because there's so much that still has to be done that's not been dealt with.
Thank you for having me on, Roland. And this is certainly a solemn observance. When we come to April 4th, and you remind me of those words from April 3rd, it brings a sense of sadness and disappointment. We're 55 years from the assassination, and we have not made the kind of progress that I think Dr. King had in mind. Memphis continues to be one of the most impoverished cities in the country. And it is of utmost importance for not only people of faith, but leaders in the faith community and Black preachers in particular, to not only become prophetic voices, but be constructive to the end of putting in place prophetic ministries.
And so what do you say to the people out there who say, you know what, I'm not feeling these pastors of these churches. This is where I say the church has to go beyond the church walls and show people what they're doing and not just simply say, show up.
So I think to those, we have to let our actions speak for us. So that means, on one end, it means engaging elected officials and challenging those policies that continue to produce so much poverty in African-American communities. But to the second thing I think we need to do is it takes collaboration beyond churches or within churches with other church leaders and congregations in order to come up with creative solutions. So one of the things we've done in Memphis, our impoverished communities plagued with predatory lending through title loans and other mechanisms that are used to put people in a cycle of debt. And so we've worked together as pastors in the Black Clergy Collaborative from Memphis and with the Hope Credit Union to put together a small loan fund so that our people have an alternative they can go to when we know that in a city that's 65% African American, where 50% of African Americans are underbanked or unbanked, they can have access to resources when they find themselves in an emergent situation.
That all of that is critically important. And as I said, first of all, to everybody who's watching, this is a live look right now at the MLK Memorial here in the nation's capital. Our cameras are out there. You see Martin Luther King III. He was just standing next to Harry Johnson, CEO of the Memorial Foundation. That is his wife, as well as the only grandchild of Dr. King there as well. Pastor Turner, final question for you. In terms of again, how are pastors in the city working together to make what you talk about a reality?
Mm-hmm. So, as I spoke of the small loan fund that we put together along with Hope Credit Union, we helped to put up the funding to provide the resources to the bank that in case there are defaults in these small loans, that it wouldn't come as a result of, the bank taking a hit. But as well, these loans provide necessary resources that our people have been exposed to predatory lenders who are charging 200, 300, 400%, because in Tennessee, these small loans or small predatory loans are unregulated. But also we're working together around various reforms that will help our community, not just our congregants, get to the place where we can really have a conversation around what it means to have a living wage. We've been fighting for 15, but what we're discovering at a time where there's inflation, where there are rising interest rates, the people need more than $15 an hour, especially if you're a family that has multiple children. And so really trying to work constructively to put policy in place in our city and our state so that people can make a living wage to begin to make their way out of poverty.
All right, Pastor Turner, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on this solemn day.
Thank you for having us.
Folks, got to go to break. We come back. We'll talk about what took place in New York City. Donald Trump arrested, arraigned. We'll break down all the details, give our panel expert commentary as well. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Be sure to, of course, if you're watching YouTube, hit that like button, folks. Same thing on Facebook and our OTT app. Also, download our app, Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Your dollars make it possible for us to do what we do. Look, without you, we don't have that live shot with our operator there at the MLK Memorial. That's why your resources matter. Check and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal, R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be right back.
hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, Dave.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, we're talking about the difficulty of being able to acquire wealth for Black Americans. My guest, Emily Flitter, is the author of The White Wall: How Big Finance is Bankrupting Black America.
The bad stuff that you feel when you're dealing with the financial services industry is not your fault. It's not your fault, and you don't deserve to be treated like this.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
Peace and love, everybody. I'm Purple Wonder Love.
Hey, I'm Donnie Simpson.
What's up? I'm Lance Gross, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
The life and legacy of Dr. King, we say thank you, God, for all that you imported into him, and for all who understand the significance of this celebration and commemoration. God, we thank you for all who are gathered in this space to celebrate the life, the legacy, the dream, and the dreamer. And as we gather under the shadow of this great monument, we also gather under the canopy, dear God, of your grace, your glory, your mercy, your favor, and your anointing. We approach your throne tonight as we begin this celebration and commemoration.
Folks, that's a live look at the MLK Memorial here in the nation's capital. We are live streaming that event. It's available on the Black Star Network on our YouTube channel as well. Now, let's talk about what took place today in New York City. I got the Black Yak with me. Donald Trump hit with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, from an investigation into the hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump pled not guilty. If convicted, he could face up to a 136-year maximum sentence. Falsifying business records is a misdemeanor in New York, but can be upgraded to a felony if the action is done to hide other crimes. Trump was not handcuffed, jailed, or subjected to a mugshot. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg explains why Donald Trump is facing felony charges.
Felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements.
Oh, Trump accused Bragg of using the case as a politically motivated witch hunt, recently lashing out at the DA and judge in his case. Trump's erratic behavior could prompt Judge Juan Merchant to issue a gag order to prevent him or his attorneys from speaking publicly about the case outside court filings and proceedings. Protesters and counter-protesters assembled outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse in New York today, including Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and New York Representative George Santos. Let's break this whole thing down, folks, with what took place today. I've got Charles Butler, a member of the Project 21 National Advisory Committee out of Chicago, attorney Matt Manning. He is out of Texas. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for environmental justice, the EPA. Dr. Niambi Carter, associate professor, University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Dr. Jason Nichols, senior lecturer, African American Studies, University of Maryland at College Park. Glad to have all of you here. Matt, I want to start with you. You're the lawyer here. A lot of people were speculating before, oh, weak case, weak case. How do you assess these 34 counts?
So I think they brought this the right way, and the reason I think they brought it the right way is because they made the crime as narrow as possible. So the crime here is falsifying business documents, and what they're alleging, obviously, is that there were payments made to Mr. Cohen that alleged to be payments for his legal services that were not, in fact, for legal services. I think the case can be strong by virtue of how many counts they brought. 34 counts could mean that a jury could find one single count he was, in fact, guilty of, and that could be enough to not only convict him, but also potentially send him to prison. Where I think there will be difficulty is going to be jurisdictionally, how they prove where certain things occurred. And even though the indictment kind of hedges on that and says it may have occurred in New York County or elsewhere, they're ultimately going to have to prove to a jury that the finality of the crime, i.e. the actual entry of the false record, occurred in New York County, or at least has enough of a nexus to New York County for there not to be a reasonable doubt on that. Where I think there will be difficulty is going to be keeping clear to a jury exactly who made what payment when, how the money was transferred, because those things are easy to see on paper, but they're difficult when you're hearing it from a witness, right? When witnesses are testifying where they got money from, who they sent it to, and proving that to a jury. Because one of the problems that I think they'll have is that this Trump organization is enormous. It has a lot of moving parts and a lot of people that work for it. So it may be more difficult than people are able to recognize to prove that, in fact, Donald Trump is the one who falsified the records. However, there are apparently, based on the statement of facts, a number of pieces of evidence that they're able to directly tie to Mr. Trump as having made those payments on his own. And that's where I think the difficulty will be for his defense team, because no matter how much they try to create smoke and mirrors, if someone gets on the stand and says, he paid me, I met him, we talked about it, and he's the one who signed the check, and there's any, extrinsic proof of that, I think they're going to have difficulty defending all 34 counts. And that's why I think they brought it in a smart way. I also think that the statement of facts is good because it trots out the entire context. And what people may not understand about this is when you prosecute a criminal case, depending on how the law works in that particular state, you're able to put forth a lot of contextual evidence. So what's important about that here is all of the stuff will come in, for the most part, depending on what the judge allows in, based on the conversations and rather the payments to Stormy Daniels and to the other woman that are alleged in the statement of facts. That's important because a jury will be able to see the full context of not only what payments were made, but why those payments were made, which would lend credence to the idea that Mr. Trump in fact, wanted those payments to be made and may have facilitated some of them. So I think it's a strong case in terms of how it's brought. I think the difficulty will be in the presentation and keeping clear to 12 people exactly what he's alleged to have done, when he's alleged to have done it, and having proof thereof.
A lot of people talk about, again, our system says equal justice under law, but the reality is he wasn't fingerprinted. There was no mugshot, wasn't handcuffed. Was that fair and just?
I don't think so. I mean, if that's what happens to every other defendant in New York criminal court, that's exactly what should have happened to Donald Trump. I do think that there will be some considerations that are going to be unique to him. I mean, being the former president, he's got Secret Service detail and presumably a very busy schedule. But I was thinking before I even got on the show tonight, in most of the cases that I have, one of the constant things that a defendant has to do is remain domiciled in that county, and they can't leave without permission. I don't know how his pretrial officer is going to enforce that happens, but here you just have a defendant who has a different life than most defendants. But that doesn't mean that what happens in the courtroom needed to be different. So he definitely should have been fingerprinted, and all of the other mechanisms that they use with any other defendant should have been exercised with him.
Well, in fact, when we think about when former Mayor Andrew Gillum, go to my iPad, when he appeared in court, you will see there it says Gillum walked into the courtroom wearing leg shackles and handcuffs with a chain around his waist. The same for Sharon Letman Hicks, who was also charged in the case as well. Charles Butler, you've been an ardent supporter of the president. Again, the DA has hit him with these 34 different charges. He's been blasting it, calling it a political witch hunt, but his own lawyer went to jail for the same issue.
Well, Roland, I want to congratulate you, first of all, on your great show. I'm glad you're back on the air. You're kicking it, man. I love it. I love your show. I love your energy, and I love what you do.
Appreciate
so I want to
it.
get that out of the way. But Roland, you and I have been around this game a long time. And when Cyrus Vance Jr. didn't take up going after Donald Trump, there's something there. Cyrus Vance Jr., as you well know, is old school, old boy, connected white boy. Powerful. I think Mr. Bragg went out on a limb. I think he's going to get burned. I think Fannie Willis down in Atlanta, I think she's going to get burned. I think when you look at the statute of limitations, I mean, where do you stop? If statute of limitations on a misdemeanor is 2 years, and you go back and say, well, I'm going to stretch it to 3. I want to make it a felony so I get 5. I had the same thing happen to me in Chicago with some Chicago cops who tried to take a misdemeanor and make it a felony. And the state wouldn't do it because it was so ridiculous, because the incident never happened in the first place, where I was supposed to whip this white boy and took his cane and all this other stuff. But the incident never happened. But that's how the cops wrote it up. But it was dismissed and all that good stuff. Anyway, I think that Bragg made a mistake. I'm sorry that he's out there on that limb by himself, because there's some very powerful people out there who are not supporting him and not supporting what he did, and they're on his side of the aisle.
Well, the thing that I find to be interesting here, Niambi, is that if we're talking about an equal justice system, Donald Trump is getting the benefit of the doubt that other folks have not gotten. And the reality is this here. Republicans typically are super law and order, very much about pro-prosecution, pro-DA, pro-law enforcement. In this case, they're anti-law enforcement.
They were also anti-law enforcement on January 6th. They were anti-law enforcement this entire time. I mean, look, Donald Trump is going to say what he always says, that this is part of some deep state conspiracy to come after him, and never address the real substance of the matter. So while people want to say this is small potatoes, these were misdemeanors, when you're trying to cover up another crime, that can make it a felony. And the fact of the matter is they were relying on campaign documents, these supposed payments to Michael Cohen, which were supposed to be for legal services, were just reimbursement so he could funnel this hush money to not just Stormy Daniels, but another woman and allegedly also a doorman. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think your previous guests were right that trying to get a jury to understand this is going to probably be the harder part. But we have to remember, they've been talking to this grand jury since January, and they got that grand jury to at least agree to indict. And while an indictment is not a conviction, I do think getting this far is at least a suggestion that Donald Trump is not invulnerable, right? I mean, and I think this is an important moment to reinforce that for everyone. No one is above the law, even former presidents. And I think Republicans are kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth when they talk about this law and order thing. They want us to wait and see and let all the facts come out. But when the facts come out on their kind of people, they don't want to accept them for what they are.
Mustafa. You're unmuted. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm old enough to remember, if you can hear me.
Yep, we got you. We got you.
When Donald Trump created a witch hunt against the Central Park Five and did everything that he could to make sure that the legal system utilized its full ability to prosecute those innocent brothers. So now that the chickens have come home to roost, he now gets the opportunity to feel the same spotlight of when, someone is going through this type of situation. And for those who say that he's being treated unfairly, I would remind them about People versus the New York versus James Garner, or versus Josue Aguila Dubon, or Jose Palmer, or Juan Foley. All of these folks were actually convicted on the falsification of business records. So now, we have to make sure that justice is equal, and that means that he has to face the same jury trial that all these other folks had to go through.
Jason, I think about a young black man who spent a long time in Rikers, allegedly for stealing a backpack. A backpack. So people talk about Donald Trump being treated unfairly. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, rest in peace to Khalif Browder. Yeah, I mean, first of all, if we look at it, John Edwards has a mugshot. We saw John Edwards' mugshot. We've seen Tom DeLay's mugshot. John Edwards was a former presidential candidate and a former vice presidential nominee. He still got a mugshot. For some reason, we didn't do that with Donald Trump. The other thing, to the point about Cy Vance that one of your guests made, Cy Vance was told to stand down by the SDNY, who, of course, were directed by Bill Barr, who was the head of the DOJ at the time. At the same time, at that point in time, you cannot indict a sitting president. So all of that, that argument, I think, is not a strong one. The other thing is, I think Donald Trump is in trouble right now because of, as you stated earlier, the head of AMI, David Pecker. So it's one thing, you can easily impeach the credibility of someone like Michael Cohen. You can say he's a convicted liar. You can say all of those things. You can say he had an axe to grind. You can say he's out doing media. He wants his podcast to blow up. You can say all of that. But then you bring in David Pecker, and there's somebody backing up the story. Now, mind you, there's also video of Rudy Giuliani admitting that he looked at the records and saw that he had paid Michael Cohen for services that were never rendered. Now, again, one of the things that we know is that hush money payments in and of themselves are not a crime. That's not a crime. But when you're doing it in the way that Donald Trump did it, it can be elevated to a misdemeanor when you're falsifying records, if you're falsifying it for the purposes of taxes, whatever it is, that becomes a misdemeanor. And of course, if you're doing it in furtherance of another crime, then it becomes a low-level felony. I don't believe we're ever going to see Donald Trump in jail because of who he is, because if you can shoplift somewhere in Harlem, and I guarantee you'll see the inside of a jail cell, but you won't see it if you're a powerful billionaire flying in on private jets. And it really upsets me that there are so many people out there. He's raised $10 million off of this. There are people out there who complained about inflation, complained about gas prices, but they have money to subsidize a billionaire's legal bills. And I don't fully understand that. They also screamed, lock her up. All that time, they went around and said, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump himself said she may be indicted, so she is disqualified from running. But yet, all of a sudden, the tune has changed. And one last thing, when the gentleman said something about Cy Vance's side of the aisle, I think Cy Vance's, Alvin Bragg's side of the aisle, I think Alvin Bragg's side of the aisle is the law. That's what Alvin Bragg's side of the aisle is.
No,
he's not coming and prosecuting this as a Democrat or a Republican.
He certainly is.
Go ahead, Charles.
He certainly is, Roland. This has been political from the get-go. He ran on the fact that he was going to prosecute Donald Trump. So for you to sit there and say it's not political, the guy used it in his campaign.
So help me out here. Let me just be perfectly clear. Donald Trump said things that he was going to do. It's a political office. And the reality is, you also take a look at it. You had an attorney general when Trump was president who tried to roll back the consent decree in Baltimore, and the federal judge said absolutely not, we're moving forward with it. So when you talk about what Cy Vance didn't do, the reality is when you have a new person in, things change. Look, you had a DA in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, that prosecuted Bill Cosby when the previous DA chose not to prosecute Bill Cosby. There are other examples where a new DA comes in and says, these now are the policies of our department, which is different from the previous one. You had the DA in San Francisco who was recalled, and the new DA comes in and reverses many of the things that he did. That's what happens when someone new comes in. Hold tight 1 second. I'm going to pay some bills. We're going to come back. Round two of our comments on this case. We're discussing Trump getting arraigned in court. He now becomes the first former president hit with criminal charges in American history. Stuff, it catches up with you. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
And Native communities.
Not many people talk about it because they clearly don't know our lives. But with President Biden's landmark infrastructure and climate plans, our issues are finally seen.
Removing lead pipes means we know our water is safe. Cutting carbon pollution helps our kids breathe easier. 1.5 million new jobs means stable work in communities. The impact we need
right now.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, we're talking about the difficulty of being able to acquire wealth for Black Americans. My guest, Emily Flitter, is the author of The White Wall: How Big Finance is Bankrupting Black Americans.
The bad stuff that you feel when you're dealing with the financial services industry is not your fault. It's not your fault, and you don't deserve to be treated like this.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett.
Yo, it's your man Deion Cole from Blackish, and you're watching
Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Stay woke.
Peace will not be full without justice. That is why today we have dozens, more than 70,000 individual cases opened by our prosecutors on the war crimes. That is why we have 21 countries now investigating Russian perpetrators' crimes. That is why 3 international courts already reviewing cases, and one issued arrest warrant for Putin for one of the most horrible crimes, kidnapping of our Ukrainian children. That is why we have to join forces to have that international tribunal on the crime of aggression. to have all leaders of Kremlin responsible. Because again,
that's a live shout out, folks, at the MLK Memorial here in Washington, D.C. We are live streaming that on the Black Star Network. Reverend Al Sharpton is going to be the featured speaker there. We're back talking about what took place in New York City today, Donald Trump being arraigned. My guests, we have Charles Butler, Matt Manning, Dr. Naim B. Carter. We, of course, have Mustafa, my alpha brother, and of course, well, Charles is alpha too, so I won't leave you out, Charles. And then we got Jason as well. The thing here, Charles, Trump has been attacking the judge. I wouldn't really advise that. I know he loves to attack everybody, but if it's one person you probably don't want to be running your mouth about, it's the judge.
Well, his mouth lost in the election, Roland. So, I mean, the guy is a New Yorker. You know, he talks, he says the wrong things, he focuses on the wrong issues. This is not a reality show. You know, he's running for president of the United States. And he needs to get serious about what's going on here. And this thing with Stormy Daniels is going to blow over. You know, I mean, that's what these people do. You and I, we going to go to jail. You know, we gotta come out of pocket and spend lawyer and attorney fees. The system's broken. We know, we as black men, we know there are 2 or 3 systems of justice. So, you know, you look at a guy like OJ. If OJ didn't have the money he had, he'd still be serving time. And by the way, you mentioned Bill Cosby. That was totally wrong going after Cosby. Totally. And I'm glad the man is out.
But the thing here, Matt, is interesting because I hear what Charles is saying, but here's the deal. Donald Trump has gotten preferential treatment because of who he is, because of his money. Folks have been scared to hold him accountable. And so for the people who are now mad because he got indicted, well, hell, right. Wesley Snipes went to prison. Ron Isley went to prison not paying their taxes. Look, Dan Morales was a former Texas attorney general who went to prison for falsifying loan documents, overstating income. Hello? Donald Trump we know what the hell he's done. He has gotten away with things because of who he is. To me, this is the system saying, yeah, you're not above the law, dude.
Yeah, and 2 things can be true at the same time. If you notice, Charles jumped straight to the straw man you always hear, which is an indictment of the whole system. And there's no question. The system is itself flawed. It is not applied evenly. Those things are true. However, it is also true that in this case, Donald Trump made payments to conceal a crime, and he did it in the dumbest way possible, which makes no sense to me considering the infrastructure that you have. Why would you falsify the documents rather than just get money from your own bank account and pay it to him cash? I mean, not that I'm in any way encouraging criminal activity, but it doesn't make any sense to me that this is the route that they went. And it could be part and parcel with the idea that he thinks he's Teflon Don. No matter what happens, I'm going to beat it every time. You're a billionaire. The reality is you move through the space differently. The problem I think they have in this case is 34 counts is a lot of counts. So he could be cooked on 1, 5, 10, 15. They could find him not guilty on the other 19, and it's immaterial because he's guilty on whatever number that they find. And the thing about this case that I think will be difficult for his defense team is if they're able to really kind of obfuscate, you know, how the money moved and who got money and all of that, they'll probably confuse a number of the jurors. But if the prosecution does a good job of keeping it very simple with basic evidence on this day, Donald Trump in this place made this payment to Michael Cohen or to this other person, then they're going to have a lot of trouble because if the jury finds beyond a reasonable doubt that he in fact made those payments, then he's cooked. It's pretty simple. And that's why I think this indictment is put forward in a smart way. Now, do I think there's a political element? Of course, everything has political overtones these days. But if we're going to have a system, it has to work, you know, in a certain way. And that right way is when somebody is indicted, they're arraigned, and they have to deal with the charges. I think what makes this case particularly hard and that's actually out of Trump's control is just the reality that he's the former president. And I don't know how you supervise a former president on bond conditions. I don't know how you enforce those bond conditions. I don't know how you interact with the Secret Service. I mean, there are parts of this case that are just going to be different. And frankly, I think parts of this case that will really kind of push things in the public zeitgeist is, does Donald Trump get a fair trial? I have no question that there's probably going to be very compelling evidence there. but the whole world knew about the nature of these charges before he ever went to trial. So I do think it implicates some constitutional questions and questions about venue and all those kinds of things. But I mean, if they get people in the box referring to the veneer people and they say I can be fair and impartial and I don't know enough about this situation to have my mind made up now, that theoretically he could get a fair trial wherein they might, in fact, convict him of at least a number of these counts.
I'm cracking up laughing at a lot of these people who are like, oh, this absolutely helps Donald Trump politically. I don't necessarily think so.
Well, I mean, that remains to be seen. We know for his diehard supporters, there's not a lot that anybody can say or do that's going to dissuade them. Now, what we do know is that scandals typically don't work well for candidates, but the way that looks is probably going to be different because you have a lot of members of his own party who've decided to either say nothing or say they support him, even if it's the most tepid support. They're going to say that outwardly because right now they want to kind of close ranks around him. I think what's probably more likely to happen is those Republican leaners who sat out in 2020 because they didn't like Donald Trump, those people who are Republicans and vote Republican most of the time, but this was not the guy that they could stand or stomach anymore, particularly after January 6th and all the other things. I think what's probably more likely than not to happen is those people will stay home. The problem is we have a primary cycle, and that's when the most motivated people show up. So if you have a bunch of Trump supporters showing up for the primary, he could still walk away with the nomination because primary voters aren't like general election voters. For some of the reasons that you pointed out, Roland, people get fatigued, people get tired, and at least for now, he is still standing above his challengers, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, for this Republican nomination. So, I mean, he could eke something out if he can make it through a primary, and that's kind of all he needs to do right now. He could still show up in the general election.
But Jason, one of the reasons that why he lost, people were sick of the crazy. And the reality is he brings the crazy back, and you can't try to make an argument, hey, well, let's move America forward when we're dealing with the crazies.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Nyambi. I think his whole political brand is victimization and grievance. That's his political brand. And so I think in a Republican primary, he brings out the crazies, but the crazies have the loudest voices. And sometimes that will help him because these people like to feel like they're being aggrieved and they're being victimized. So I think he's actually going to run away. If I were to predict, I don't think it's going to be close. I think he's going to run away with it. We also know that Ron DeSantis just doesn't have it. Like he's just not the guy. He comes across as smug and just not personable. And I think Donald Trump is a performer. And now he's going to put on the performance of I'm being wronged. They really want to come after you. I'm just standing in their way. He's going to do all of that. And I think that it will work with the primary. But I also agree with Nyambi that when it comes to the general election, this is not going to help him. Those people, those kind of Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, John Kasich kind of Republicans, they probably split in 2020. And they're going to completely go and vote third party or not vote at all come 2024 if Donald Trump is the candidate. They realize that he is a political liability. We've seen him lose or at least really hurt Republicans in 3 straight elections right now from 18, 20, and 22. So I think they can't dump Trump because the loud voices are with him. The crazies are with him. He has such an aggressive base that everybody is afraid of, and that's why they're coalescing around him instead of attacking him right now. But I think it's going to hurt him in a general election, and Joe Biden will run away with it. And I don't think Joe Biden is a particularly popular president right now, but he'll run away with this thing. The one thing that I'll disagree with, I agree with everything Matt said except for one thing, and that is earlier he talked about the Trump organization kind of being a big company. And I think one of the things that Alvin Bragg, I think, is going to try and get across is that, like Barbara Rez says, who actually worked with Trump for many, many years, is that the Trump Organization is not General Motors. It's not a big company, and that Donald Trump has knowledge of every single thing that happens and goes on. So he doesn't have plausible deniability in saying, oh, I didn't know where the money went. I didn't direct this. This was some assistant or some, junior vice president. He knew everything that went on in that company. He had his hands in every single element. Him and Alan Weisselberg made all the decisions together. So I think it's more about showing that this is not General Motors. This is not the company that you thought you knew from watching The Apprentice. It is a small company that just, dealt with big money.
Mustafa, look, here's the deal. We can talk about who gets impacted, who doesn't. Here's the reality. He is going to have to be dealing with a criminal proceeding. He's running for president. And here's what it's also going to do. It's going to expose all of these Republicans. It's going to expose them and also the white evangelicals, because ain't nothing like, hey, please defend payments to a porn star. Please defend paying off a doorman who said you had a child out of wedlock.
Yeah, it's interesting. Donald Trump has never cared about the rule of law. He's never cared about people in this country. Before he became president in 2016, 30 years before that, he had over 3,500 cases where he had been sued. So you bring that forward, that you have individuals who are still willing to stand behind him, to support him, as was said, both financially and with people's time. But, like I said before, the chickens have now come home to roost. He's going to find out that the rule of law exists in our country and that he can no longer bully folks, he can no longer escape the law, and that he will be held accountable.
All right, well, we'll see what the hell happens. Here's what's not going to happen. Ain't no in hell I'm dedicating every damn show to this bullshit dealing with Donald Trump. There's a lot of stuff we got to focus on in Black America. And if y'all want to see that kind of crap, y'all can go to CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and the rest of them. That ain't what I'm doing. That's why he didn't lead my show today. The murder of my alpha brother, Dr. King, remembering that's what led this show. That's why we do what we do. Charles Butler, thanks a bunch. Matt Manning, thanks a bunch. Appreciate it. We'll be right back talking to one of the Tennessee representatives who Republicans there are trying to expel, who want gun control. That is next on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
A lot of these corporations or people that are running stuff push black people if they're doing a certain thing. What that does is it creates a butterfly effect of any young kid who, wants to leave any situation they're in, and the only people they see are people that are doing this. So I got to be a gangster, I got to shoot, I got to sell, I got to do this in order to do it. And it just becomes a cycle. But when someone comes around and is making we don't, they don't want to push it or put money into it. So that's definitely something I'm trying to fix too, is just show there's other avenues. You don't got to be a rapper, you don't got to be a ball player, you can be a country singer, you can be an opera singer, you can be a damn whatever, showing the different avenues. And that is possible, and it's hard for people to realize it's possible until someone does it.
Talk about blackness and what happens in black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
when we had Yolanda. So I'm understandably, I don't want to say fool, but I am certainly reflecting. But at the end of the day, I hope that I always am reflecting in love as I prepare to go to my seat. Because we do live in one of the greatest nations in the world. And what I mean by that, we have not yet created that fulfillment of greatness. Because this nation has so much, and we ought to all be so grateful and thankful. We live in a nation where you have millions of people living impoverished.
This is Martin Luther King III speaking right now at the wreath-laying ceremony at the MLK Memorial here in the nation's capital. We are at the Black Star Network is there. We are live streaming this event. So that live stream is happening as we are live here on the show. And so you can check that out. We will also restream that whole program later as well. Folks, we talk about democracy. We talk about the importance of elected representatives. Yet in Tennessee, Republicans there are trying to penalize 3 Democrats who stood up with young folks when it came to protesting. What happened was, of course, you had the shooting in, turn the audio up, please. So you had the shooting that took place in Nashville, where protesters have been descending upon the state capitol, demanding action. Well, this is how Republicans are rewarding the action. They're not fighting guns. They're literally trying to expel 3 Democrats who stood with the protesters, saying that they simply spoke out of turn and broke the rules. Let me be clear, broke the rules. Broke the rules. And they want to throw them out of the legislature. One of them is Justin Pearson, newly elected there. He joins us right now. So explain, Justin, so they're saying y'all spoke out of turn?
Right. So they're saying that we broke House decorum because we went to the floor of the House after complete silence from the leadership and after we were denied the opportunity to welcome the protesters and those who came peacefully, who were mostly children and teenagers who came to our Capitol to say that we need to do something about gun control. We need to do something about gun reform. And instead of us actually doing the work of passing laws and legislation that the people are demanding. In fact, Roland, one of the things they were just screaming were just do something. Do something. And myself, Representative Jones, and Representative Johnson went to the well between bills and said, we need to listen to these folks up here, not the NRA, not organizations and lobbyists who pour money into the State House, but we need to listen to the people who want for us to take action. And the response from the leadership of the Republican Party in the State House in a completely partisan vote is to expel myself, Representative Jones, and Representative Johnson for bringing up the issue of gun reform and the end of the epidemic of gun violence, which is the Nashville shooting at Covenant. And it's also in our community, a lot of shootings that we're experiencing and having of family members and of community members. And it's because of laws that are being passed and in action at the State House in Tennessee.
And the House Speaker is making it clear that this vote could very well happen on Thursday to throw all 3 of you out, Justin Jones, Gloria Johnson, and yourself.
That's correct. So this Thursday at 9 a.m., we'll have our regular session, and during unfinished business, the expectation is that they will bring forward a resolution. Each of us will have the opportunity to speak in defense of ourselves and in defense of the over 200,000 people that we collectively represent, to say that this is unjust. This is what an attack on our First Amendment and the erosion of democracy looks like. Having legislators who are elected by the people to be thrown out because we're advocating against the senseless gun violence, the senseless gun legislation that continues to get passed in the State House. And instead, we want to offer real resolution and real reform to the families and to the communities that are suffering from gun violence, being told that our constituents who sent us here, the people who sent us here, voices don't matter. The people who sent us here, perspective does not matter, because if it's against what is the Republican Party and the leadership of our State House's vision of what needs to be done, which is only allow assault weapons and only allow AR-15s and make those things honorable, but not honor the lives of 6 people in Nashville who were killed, 3 who were 9 years old. not honor the lives of people like Larry Thorne, my own classmate, who was killed this year, not honor the people who are suffering under the brutality of gun violence being proliferated because of the lack of action by the Tennessee legislature. They don't want to see us take action on that. They want to see us be pacifists. They want to see us be silently complicit to the status quo, and it is killing us and having harm across our state, and it will continue to have harm across our country if we do nothing. And so Thursday, we expect the supermajority Republican legislature to say, instead of justice, we want you all out. But you cannot silence people's voices. And on this holy week, on this holy day, the 55th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination in Memphis, what rings for me is a quote that he said: "The movement lives or dies in Memphis." And I'm honored to represent Memphis and Millington and to show that the movement is alive because we won't be silenced.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a Republican who was charged with sexually assaulting minors, and they said, no, let's not throw him out because he was elected by the constituents?
I'm not sure of all of the examples of people who have done very egregious things and criminal activity that's still on the State House floor today. I do know some examples of a man physically abusing his wife. I do know some examples of egregious actions that some people have had to face a day in court about. We broke a House rule, are being told that we need to be expelled from the House. About the rule. It's about what we were advocating against, which is the proliferation of guns in our schools and in our communities. That's what they're upset about, and that's what they're wanting to expel us for.
Well, we will certainly be following this to see what happens. Representative Johnson, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep fighting.
Yes, sir. We're standing right there with you. Niambi, this is absolutely nuts, but this is also what happens when you have a supermajority. Go to my iPad. Folks, did y'all see this today? A Democrat in North Carolina, Representative Tricia Cotham from East Charlotte, she switched from a Democrat to the Republican, giving the Republicans a supermajority in North Carolina. When you have a supermajority, we see it was happening in Florida. Democrats can't stop anything, and that's what's happening all across the South. The Confederacy is rising again, Niambi.
Oh, absolutely. And what they're doing in Tennessee, I mean, the fact that we've almost given that conversation no oxygen is dangerous. I mean, it's anti-democratic. It's all of those things. I mean, what they want is to roll back the clock for all of us: women, poor whites, Black folks, Latinx folks, gay and transgender individuals. So what we're witnessing here is them, using the rules per usual to bend these institutions to their will in undemocratic ways. And I think, what's happening in Tennessee is what you want your legislators to be doing, which is standing with the people and representing the people that put them there. And yet you have those folks who are seeking to expel these three members saying we want to be the wrong side of history, the money side of history, because we want to deny the people of Tennessee a voice and their rights, and these children a right to live.
About 20 seconds each, Jason and Mustafa, go.
Dr. King said our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. We've got to raise our voice. We've got to get engaged, and we got to push.
Jason.
We also have to understand that there are all these efforts to take away your vote, and sometimes that means expelling the person you voted for. So we need to make our voices heard, absolutely.
All right, folks, that is it for us. Niambi, Jason, Mustafa, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Folks, that is it for us. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're going to end the show this way, folks. Coming up next, April 4th, 1968, Dr. King's lieutenants reflect on that particular day, on what happened. No one else has this. This is an exclusive right here on the Black Star Network. That is next after this round of commercials. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, the Black Star Network. Holla! Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.